Hi, my name is Carmen, and I am an early childhood special education teacher, a life and ADHD coach, and I'm the host of this podcast, Authentically ADHD. I created this podcast to help anyone wondering if they have ADHD, people who have been diagnosed for a while and want some more support and community. I'm here to bring you the latest research on ADHD and neurodiversities while we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of ADHD. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, my friend, and welcome back to the podcast. If you are a new listener, welcome to the tribe, my friend. I just wanted to take a few minutes to thank you all for following, listening, and rating my show. This podcast is one of the only things that I've managed to stick with for over a year and a half now, and we now have over 100 followers and listeners. I appreciate you so much. I do this for you, so again, thank you for being one of my listeners. And I appreciate you just so much. I'm giving you a virtual hug right now. All right, so on to today's content. Today's topic kind of goes along with my recent series of overwhelm because we tend to struggle with feeling behind in life or always rushing to catch up. Do you feel that way? Because I definitely do sometimes. Keeping up with daily life is a struggle for those with ADHD for a few key reasons. I went back to my research about time perception and ADHD, and we're going to talk about that perpetual thought of being behind in life, like kind of in general, and some of the societal expectations that are the groundwork of us feeling like we're behind or not enough or whatever that flavor of thought is for you. Society is built for typically developing brains, and we don't have typically developing brains. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. And did you know that in ADHD brains, we are unable to feel the sense of passing time? Like maybe it's been an hour, but it feels to you like it's only been 5 minutes. It just doesn't develop. What is an hour feels like 5 minutes in your brain. Unless you're bored, uninterested, etc., then it's unfortunately the opposite. But us as ADHDers, we just never developed the part of the brain that feels time passing like our typically developing peers. Not fair, right? Like that's what I thought the first time I learned this. This fact is where the term time blindness comes from. For the ADHDer, time is one of two things, now and not now, or now and later. When you say, be ready in 1 hour, our brain doesn't register that as like, I better start now. We sometimes believe that we can bend time to fit our own schedule. This is part of living in fantasy that we need to stop doing. We need to live in reality. Because this just we end up being behind or late, and usually this agitates our emotional regulation. So now we're dysregulated and late. And most likely we have to come up with some kind of excuse, most of the time being a lie, of why we're late. According to Dr. Russell Barkley and Dr. Russell Ramsey in their books on ADHD, we are time blind. We have trouble organizing tasks across a time continuum appropriately because of our deficient prefrontal cortex and the executive functions that are housed there. We have trouble with time, organization, planning, prioritization, decision-making, impulsivity, task initiation, task follow-through, cognitive flexibility, and self-regulation, including emotional regulation and sensory input and overload. We have a hyperactive and dysregulated mind and nervous system, and we also have an interest-based nervous system. It's no wonder we always feel like we are trying to catch up with life. I mean, it makes sense. Think about how much you do in a day, or how much of that is task, or how much of it is task switching. Transitions are also difficult, whether you're in a small transition from task to task, or a bigger transition like moving homes. It takes a mental toll on us. It also takes more of a mental toll when we do the thing that we aren't supposed to do, but we do it anyway, and we heap a bunch of shame on top. We tend to do that because we think we should be different. I invite you, my friend, to understand that you are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. And we don't need to add shame to all these things that already make us feel pretty shitty. So please, please stop. I'm begging you to look at your self-talk and make it a bit nicer. Talk to yourself a little more kindly each day, and things won't seem as bad, because they aren't. Things always seem worse than they actually are because of our brain's dumb negativity bias that wants to pay attention to all the bad and not the good. Think about it. Are you more likely to leave a review on something that you thought was going to be good but absolutely sucked? Or something that's amazing? Which one are you going to leave a review on? Usually it's the thing that sucked. As humans, that's just something that our brains bias towards. We don't have much control over that part. And the human brain is so incredibly powerful that when you think a thought such as I'm always late or I'm always running behind, your brain will immediately go to work to prove that thought true. This leads me into another mindset of being behind, and this is usually, not all the time, but usually coincides when we're diagnosed later in life, and that is just the feeling of being behind in life. When I was diagnosed at age 24, which is actually early for women, I learned that the median age for women to get diagnosed with ADHD is like 32 or something, which is what age I am now. I've almost been diagnosed for 10 years, and it's still something I work on. I work on my ADHD, my mindset, every day. A lot of times, because of our deficient prefrontal cortex, our inability to self-regulate, combined with what the neurotypical expectation is of life in a neurotypical world, achievements such as getting married, graduating college, getting a house, having children, building a career, etc., etc. Wherever we are in life, we think that we are behind because we are comparing ourselves to our neurotypical peers. Now, I just want to go into neurodivergence really quick. Being neurodiverse does not mean that you have to have ADHD or autism. You can have generalized anxiety disorder, depression, PTSD. You can have anything that affects the brain and makes it different is a neurodiversity, okay? So that's what neurodiversity is. So that affects all people who are neurodiverse trying to live in a neurotypical world. So we think the thought, I'm so behind, and then like I said, your brain is going to go to work to find all of the quote-unquote facts that prove that thought true. Then we feel behind. Then we spiral into shame, disappointment, and or grief. It may be a different emotion or a different thought for you, but this is usually the type of trail it leads down. Does this sound familiar? Is there a thought you can think of that sounds like I'm behind? Because this is an automatic thing that just happens so fast in our bodies that we don't really notice it until we feel the strong emotion of shame that we ourselves have pretty much trained our brain to do. And then it becomes a part of our lives, always feeling behind in life in what you're trying to accomplish. And then as you grow, if you don't try to change this thought or thought pattern, you will always feel perpetually behind. And that thought, I'm behind, creates emotions such as overwhelm, shame, disappointment. I have even found myself feeling disgusted by the state of my life. But I have a question for you that my coach asks. She asks it quite a bit, and it's one of my favorites. How is this working out for you? Is it working? Usually the answer is no. I mean, if shaming and berating yourself is working, it won't work long term, and even if it does, it's not healthy or useful.
Hi,
in the long
and
term.
welcome to Authentically
But
ADHD with me, Carmen, your host. I created this podcast to help anybody that struggles with neurodiversity. As a late diagnosed ADHDer, teacher, and life coach, I want to help as many people as I can with this disorder. Give you tips, tricks, the new research, and some mindset work along the way.
You should really check out
I'm here to
Focus,
spread positivity
the
and
group
help
coaching program
seriously
I'm a
as
part
many
of
people
that
as
is
possible.
for adults
Are
with
you ready?
ADHD.
Let's get
It's
started.
made and run by none other than Kristen Carter of the I Have ADHD podcast.
Hi, friend, and
I've grown
welcome back
so
to
much
the
by being
podcast.
in this program.
As you
using the
know,
tools
or
and
if
being
you didn't
in the
know,
community
the past 2 weeks
for
we have
over
been
a year
talking
now.
about overwhelm.
If you use the
This
link
is
in my
episode
show notes,
3
we
of
both
3
save
in
money
my
on
overwhelm
this or next
series.
month's
And you guys,
cost.
I
So
swear
I
I
think
live
it's worth
the
it.
things
Go
when I'm
check it
teaching
out
them
at
to you.
ihaveadhd.com
Because I went through
/focused.
a bout of overwhelm, and as we talked about in the last 2 weeks, it has helped develop a lovely cold or something, I don't know.
Speaking of
that kept
extra
me home from work
supports,
the last
I just
2
wanted
days.
to tell you all that
So
I've
after I
updated my
showered
Patreon
today
page to
and,
include
you know, I
all
talked
of the
out loud
resources
for a
that
little
I
while,
really
I was
ever
like, well,
made
I
to be held
sound
in
somewhat
one
normal.
place.
So I can
Just
start
head to my show notes.
maybe possibly
the
try to
VIP
record
members
this
do get a
episode.
little extra.
So if you
but
hear
you can
my
also
voice get a little
purchase,
raspy or something,
like my
it's
brand
because
new
I'm getting over
Ultimate
a cold.
ADHD journal and
That's
planner,
just the
which I've been
loveliness
doing
of
for the past
having
year.
ADHD,
That has worked.
being
Nothing
a
is priced
teacher
over
of small
$10,
kids,
and
and
everything is
just
at
not
least
always
50 to
taking
100
the best
pages
care of
that you can
ourselves,
download and print.
which is kind of what we're going to talk
You
about
can get it
today.
to bind it and send
I
it to
am
you,
so glad
or you can just read it off your screen
clicked
and
play
use
today,
notebook
because
paper.
today is the day
So if
that
you
I will be
want or
giving
need
you my
any
top
type of
10
that kind of
ways that
extra
I
support,
personally
just
stay
head
out
to
of
my show
overwhelm,
notes and
the things
click
that I've
the
learned
Patreon
through
link
life, the
to
things I've
join.
learned from my
I hope to
coach.
see you in there.
So far, we've talked about what overwhelm is, how to recognize it in your body. Last episode, I went over how to surf through the emotion of overwhelm, which actually you can use that surfing practice to surf really any emotion that you have. And they call it surfing because an emotion is just a 90-second wave.
Doesn't matter how much life
that comes
you
over
have done.
you from
It
research.
takes time
Now,
and
it doesn't
intentional
say that
practice,
emotion can't
but we
come
can
back,
change our brains.
but it does
You wanna
only
know how
last
I
about
know?
90 seconds to
done
begin
it.
with.
I've
If it
rewired
carries
my
on
brain
longer than
into
that, it's
major
your
areas.
thoughts.
One, being
creating
in
that emotion.
wellness and working
So
out daily.
we've
and
talked
the
about
other
all of the
is
reasons
talking
that we
to
as
myself
neurodiverse
in
people
a kind
experience
way.
overwhelm and burnout
Now, it took me
so much
about
more
a year
frequently
to do
than our
both.
neurotypical
I made
peers.
working out a daily routine.
But first,
by
I really want to
intentionally thinking
review
about how great I
why
feel
we feel
after
this
the
so
workout.
strongly.
Are there still
Why
days
we usually
I don't
really
want to
don't
get
know
up
what
and
to
work
do
out?
with overwhelm or what it means. But
I only
overwhelm
listen
is mainly an emotion.
if my body
it can
is
be
telling
a
me I need a
situation,
break.
it can be a thought,
This
and it can
coincides
be
with
the
the
fact
fact that I have improved
it is
my
mainly an
self-talk
emotion.
immensely.
And ADHDers have
I
a hard
started
time
by just catching
identifying,
myself every time I called myself a
naming
moron or a
pretty much
dumbass,
all
or how could you do
emotions.
that again?
For a lot of us,
I thought
we
I was
are used
useless,
to pushing
annoying,
emotions down,
a dumb
throwing
girl,
them at others,
all of these
or just
things that
bypassing
don't
them completely
apply until
they
we
aren't
can't
helpful,
anymore.
kind,
Or
which
really,
then
they don't
we
do
usually
anything
explode
for me but make me feel
I want to teach
terrible
you
about
what my
myself.
coach has taught me.
So every time I would catch
Emotions
myself, and
are not
I would have to
problems
say out
to be
loud,
solved. Stop it.
They're
Carmen,
experiences
we are not
to be
speaking
had.
to ourselves
Okay.
like this
I'm going to say it
anymore.
again because it's
useful.
super important.
I am not
Emotions
going
are
to
not
add
problems
to whatever
to be
issue
solved.
I'm having.
They are
By calling
experiences
myself
to be had.
names,
And
shaming,
we can
and
feel
berating
some of these
myself.
emotions without
It's also
crumbling.
useful to have
Now, I'm not
something
talking
to
about
call yourself instead.
grief. I'm not talking
So
about strong,
instead
deep
of
emotions that
calling
do
myself
sometimes
annoying, a moron,
allow
or
us to
dumb,
crumble. But
I will just
I'm talking
do
about
what my
us
preschoolers do. I'm
dramatizing,
like, oh, silly
overwhelm,
me.
and spinning,
I was doing
and
this instead
overwhelm,
of that.
and letting
Let me
it
get
pretty
back on
much
track.
take over
Silly
all of our
ADHD.
actions,
There it
what we
is,
do,
showing
what
up
we
again.
say, and how we act.
I think I learned this
The
from
other
one
big
of the
part of
self-help
this
books
is
that
how
I've
you
read.
speak
I've
to
read
yourself
so many
when you're
that
in
I could
overwhelm, or
probably
after
do a
you
whole
realize
episode
it.
on all of the books.
Do you
that I have
validate
read,
your own emotion?
for self-help?
Are you
but I
kind
digress.
to yourself when you are identifying
Neuroplasticity
and processing
is
the
the
emotion,
scientific
or
term
are you
that
beating
describes
yourself
the
up?
fact that the brain
Because
can
remember,
change
we
over
cannot
time.
use
It's
shame
like a
to
muscle.
grow. It
You
doesn't
can
work
grow
that
it.
way.
You can change it to be
This
different.
is also not something
the great
that
news
one
here is that you are
3-episode
not
series can
destined
just
to
help
stay
you
in the spot of
completely
your life that
get
you think
over
you can't get out of.
overwhelm, in quotes.
I have even
you may
more
want
good
to come
news
back
and
to
a few
this
tips,
for
but I want you to
reminders.
remember that
Sometimes overwhelm
consistency
is your
not the
situation
key here.
because you do have
Because
so
all of
much
this
on your
takes
plate.
a lot of time.
You are
and
living in
ADHDers
chaos
are not
because
great
it's
with
familiar.
consistency. Give
You may
yourself
not
grace.
like to live in chaos.
Give yourself
but
the
brain
grace of the
seriously
time
loves
to
what's
learn
familiar,
it,
you guys.
to
The brain
relearn,
is so
to
strong.
unlearn,
It
and
loves
rewire
what's
yourself.
familiar. So you will
The
always
key
go
is
back
persistence.
to the way you felt.
You have ADHD.
That was familiar.
You will forget.
Because
you will be
familiarity
impulsive,
is more
you will
comfortable to your
fail.
brain.
But there
than
is no
a
success
calmness.
without failure.
Because
As long as
chaos
you're willing to keep
equals
getting
familiar,
back up and getting back on track,
which equals
and trying
comfortable.
again,
Okay,
trying differently,
calm equals
trying
unfamiliar,
harder,
equals
whatever it is.
unfamiliar,
you will see
uncomfortable.
success. So,
Overwhelm
is
is not something we can just like turn off and go about our business.
I'm going to say that again.
What I've learned is that overwhelm is a warning.
Behind.
It's a
Wanna know
warning
why?
that you are doing too much.
Because
it's like, hey,
I'm behind
I have an
is a
emotion.
judgment.
I'm feeling.
It's a
I
thought,
need something.
not a fact. I know
It's
your
telling
brain
you
is
you're
bringing up
working
all
outside
the
of your
evidence
capacity.
saying that you are
So instead
behind
of judging
because it has
yourself and
years worth
berating
of
and
evidence
shaming yourself,
to prove
ask
that
yourself
thought
this question:
true.
How can it be true that I
Okay.
am overwhelmed?
That's kind
How
of what
can
happens.
it be true that I am doing
and then,
too much?
If you're a
Ask
long-time
yourself
listener,
with kindness
you know
and compassion.
that thoughts
In what ways
are
is
kind
this
of
really
automatic.
too much?
A situation happens.
This is why we talked so much
We have
about
thoughts that are
developing
pretty much
self-awareness
automatic,
and
which
getting in
trigger
touch
an emotion,
with our
maybe a
true
couple emotions,
capacity.
And that emotion
ADHDers
fuels
and
our actions
neurodiverse
or
brained
inaction,
people like us
which
tend
in
to
turn
run
gives us
away
our
from
results.
overwhelm. We think
Here are some
that we are getting
examples of
over
thoughts
it,
that
but
we
really
automatically
we are
think
just hiding
when we believe we
we're
are
avoiding,
behind.
procrastinating.
I never have enough
and ultimately,
time.
we're just
It's too
lying
late
to
for
ourselves.
me. I suck
Now,
at
I'm
time
going to stop here and I'm
management.
going to say if you have
I
not
can never
listened
get
to the
anything
previous
done
2
on time.
episodes,
I never do
it's
anything
not a
right,
requirement in order to listen to
etc.,
this one,
etc.,
but I would
etc.
definitely
I
suggest
invite
you
you
go
to
back
add your own
and listen
thoughts
to those 2
that come
first
up
because we
as I
talked
read
a
those.
lot about
What are
getting to know
your flavor
yourself,
of thoughts around
self-awareness,
time
and knowing your
and
capacity.
being behind?
Because when
Now,
we
tell
avoid,
me,
hide,
when you
and
think that
procrastinate,
thought, what
these
emotion
avoidance
does it
behaviors
bring
and
up in your
thoughts
body?
are really energy sucking.
Usually, the emotion
They
is
can
shame,
lead you to doing
guilt,
absolutely nothing, and
or
we cannot
disappointment.
afford to waste our
And
capacity
those emotions
in
almost
these
always
negative
fuel us
thought
to
loops
spin,
and avoidance.
procrastinate, and
We need
hide.
a new plan.
Now, I want you to
If you
think
think
about
back to how
time
you've
and your
handled
ability to
overwhelm
manage
recently,
your mind within
these
the
avoidance
concept
behaviors
of time.
really,
Because I have a whole episode on time
they kind
and
of look
time
like
blindness.
this. Thoughts you may
And
have,
it
such
explains
as
that we
well,
cannot
other people
manage time.
can do X,
We
Y,
cannot
Z.
manipulate it.
Why
we can
can't
only
I just
manage
do
what's in our
X,
control.
Y, Z?
So we can
I
only
am
manage
just
our
terrible
mind
at life
within
because I
the
can
concept
never
of
do
time.
X,
If
Y,
you think
Z.
things like
First
I
of all,
never have
are
enough
those thoughts
time, I
helpful?
hate time, etc., etc.,
Are they kind?
you will create results in which
Are
those thoughts
they
will
true?
prove to be true, and you
Because
won't
I
have enough
highly
time.
doubt other
You'll
people
never have enough time.
can do
It's
the
your mindset
unrealistic
about time
to-do list
that you
you've
need to
set out for
focus on.
yourself.
And
I also
making
apologize in
that
advance
time
if you can
super
hear
visible.
my brother above me.
Like I said,
This is what
with
thin walls
planners,
get us. But
journals,
hopefully this mic
I
is
do
drowning
a
him
weekly
out.
reflection
Anyways,
of my executive
Do you ever
functions,
think to yourself,
which is
I'm
included
just a terrible
in the
person
planner that I
because
talked
I
about
can't
that's on
do
Patreon.
X, Y, and Z.
We need to
Because
make time
I'm
visible with
promising you
clocks,
right now,
planners,
your to-do
alarms,
list is
and so
probably
on.
so
We have to
long
make our
and
brains
so unattainable
external.
that even the most
Our brains are
neurotypical of
meant
typical
for two
people
purposes:
wouldn't
to
be able
stay
to get
alive
it done
and to
in the
problem
time
solve
that you
while
think
staying
that you
alive.
should be able to get it
And
done.
it's so much harder for our
These
brains
thoughts
to do
create
that
shame.
when we are trying to hold all the
And
to-dos,
in the words of Brene Brown,
thoughts, emotions,
shame is the master
shoulds,
emotion,
etc.,
that makes
etc., etc.
that
Get
feeling
it out
of
your
I'm
brain.
never good enough so
Please.
pervasive. Shame is
I do want to
seriously
recap
so
here because
and
we
it
did
can
go
take
over
a
a
hit
lot
to your
today.
self-worth.
So
if you are
situations trigger
constantly
thoughts,
in
and
overwhelm,
emotions fuel
shaming
our
yourself about
actions.
it, your self-worth is
ADHDers
probably
never
pretty
develop
low.
a perception of
And
passing time, which is one of the reasons
having
why
thought maps
we
that
need
look
to make
like
time
this
visible.
situation.
I'm behind
I am
is just a
overwhelmed.
thought, not
Thought.
a fact.
I shouldn't
And
be
through
overwhelmed.
neuroplasticity,
Emotion,
you can change
shame,
your brain with practice,
our actions are to avoid,
intentionally, and
procrastinate, spin
persistence.
out,
And
shame
last,
ourselves.
we need to externalize
So
our
the result
brains
is now
because
we're
there's so
dealing
much
with
going on
overwhelm
up there
and
that we
shame.
need to get it out.
Now you've just
Again,
added to your
I
overwhelm
also
plate
invite
by
you to
giving
start
yourself
noticing
shame
when you aren't
for feeling
talking
a
to
feeling.
yourself as nicely
You have
as
shamed
you'd like
yourself
to
for feeling
be. And
overwhelmed.
just catch it.
And so now
every time
you're
you
dealing
do,
with
maybe
both
tally how many
emotions,
times
which can
you
feel
call yourself
pretty
a mean
overwhelming
name
in
or
itself.
something like that.
I want to tell
And
you
see
right
if
now
you
that
can
it's
start
not
to change
helpful.
that about yourself.
Does it sound helpful?
All right,
I'm
my
sure
friends,
it doesn't because
I
it's
know
not. You
that
are
this
a
has
human.
been
You are
kind
not a
of a
robot.
choppy episode,
No
but it
one
was
is
one I
expecting
felt
you
really
to be
needed to
more
be put
than
out there
human.
before the new year.
No one is expecting
I
you
hope
to be
that
perfect.
it helped you, and I hope that
And
you
if they
have a
are,
wonderful
I'd
celebration
question
of the new
why
year
this
with your
person
friends
is still
and
in your
family.
life.
Stay
This is
authentic,
how
and we will
perfectionism
talk
also
soon.
plays into overwhelm, trying to do too much because we say yes too much. This plays into people pleasing. When we want to say no, we overload our schedule. Then we have to drop things last minute, usually with an excuse or a lie attached to it. Or we overwork ourselves past our capacity into burnout. Sound familiar? This is literally how I used to live my life on a loop, in chaos, shame, and guilt, in lies, and just not being honest with myself or others. I'll tell you right now, it works to make people like you, and it works to feel accepted, but it's so unhealthy and it's not sustainable. Sometimes getting too overwhelmed in certain areas of our life can lead us to actually becoming physically sick. Example on the other side of this microphone. So please, I am begging you to stop hustling for your worthiness. Your worth as a human has nothing to do with how much you did or did not get done in a day. So, I know it's taken me a minute or 11 to get to the ways that we can get or stay out of overwhelm, but it's for good reason. You need to understand it first. We need to gain some self-awareness, and we need to know how to feel our emotions. The way I guide you at the end of episode 2 is the way you can feel emotions. And we have to accept that overwhelm is going to be here. It is an emotion that doesn't just go away. Okay? It doesn't. So first we have to accept that. Okay, overwhelm's here. It feels gross. I'm feeling it. It feels disgusting, and I don't like it. But now I'm going to question, why is it here without shaming myself? I'm going to validate that it's here. I'm overwhelmed, and it makes sense. Now what do we do with that? The next part involves giving yourself grace and compassion. Can you ask yourself, what do you need? What do you need, ADHDer? Seriously, friend, what do you need? Ask yourself in any way that sounds kind to you, but in the kindest way possible, in the way that you would ask your child or your best friend. Honey, what do you need? Because you need something. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's really important that the first step is to gain self-awareness and be honest with yourself about your capacity. How much can you actually handle? I want you to look at your to-do list. If it's not written down, write it down, because I'm not going to repeat how that crap doesn't belong up in your brain. Do you see how much you are holding over your own head? Now really look at these items. Do you actually want to do these things? Will these to-dos help you to achieve your goals in the end? Are these to-dos that other people have influenced you to put on that list or directly told you to put on that list? I invite you to take the items off that you do not need to do, don't want to do, or realize that you really just don't have time or capacity to do. Things that can be taken off because you can still live a happy and healthy life without doing these things, like organizing that area in your home, cleaning out your car, or going through old clothes. We put these things on our to-do list, and then we usually let them sit there, creating this extra weight, this extra overwhelm, and extra shame on top of everyday life. So, step 1 is episode 1. Gain some self-awareness. And step 2 is become aware of your capacity. We talk a lot about this in the first 2 episodes. Step 3 is clean out your to-do list. Again, this isn't something you can just learn in a 3-episode series. This is a practice. This is a practice because we need to be kind and compassionate to ourselves while we go about it, and it happens all the time. Overwhelm is not just going to go away. You're not just going to never feel overwhelmed, but now you're going to know what to do with it. Step 4 is a bit deep. Step 4 is to cut back on the chaos. ADHDers tend to struggle with living in chaos for a few reasons. One main reason is lack of awareness of time. We literally cannot feel time pass in our subconscious the way that neurotypical people can. I want you to listen to that again. We don't feel time passing. Like sitting there, we can't feel that it's been an hour. It feels like an hour to us. It's only been 5 minutes, or it feels like 5 minutes and it's been 3 hours. It's just the way that our brains work, which is why we need to make time visible. We also have a very deficient working memory. That place in your brain to pin a task or a thought long enough to complete it, we tend to forget that thought. Think about it this way. Your thought is, I want to make my bed. You go in to make your bed. You find something that goes in the cabinet in the bathroom. And as you're putting it away, you notice that the bathroom looks kind of dirty. So you start tidying up in there. Then you find something that goes, I don't know, somewhere else in the basement. And you go down there and all of a sudden you're tidying up the basement when your thought was, I need to make my bed. So that's what a deficient working memory can sometimes do, mixed with distractibility and all of the other wonderful things that come along with an ADHD brain. We also struggle with prioritization, which means we struggle to say yes to things that don't matter, while forgetting what does actually matter. This ties back into people pleasing, saying yes even when we want to say no, or should say no. And then on top of it, we also have a FOMO issue. You know, that fear of missing out. Have you ever said yes to something because you had a fear of missing out? I definitely have. And then we engage in problematic positive thinking. We have thoughts like, I can get this done, or I'll make it work, etc., etc. We think we are just time wizards, like that we can fit 6 hours of commitments into 4, but it's just not possible. That math doesn't match. It doesn't math, you guys. So step 1, gain self-awareness. 2, become aware of your capacity and be honest with yourself. 3, clean out your to-do list. And step 4, cut back on chaos. I know that these steps are meaty, but overwhelm is complex. Like I said, it's not going to be something you can improve from just a couple podcast episodes. It's a practice. I'm still working on it myself, and I've been working on it for a year. Okay, so step 5, create boundaries. Here, when I'm talking about boundaries, I mean internal boundaries. The internal boundary of living in reality. This may sound silly, but if we really, really, truly think about it, we live in fantasy quite a bit, thinking we can do all the things and please all the people. We fear rejection so much that we say yes instead of living within our own values, knowing that saying no might create a feeling of sadness in someone else and in ourselves, but that's okay. We don't have that self-trust that we can take care of ourselves in that sadness and let that other person be responsible for their own. We can't please everyone. It's just not possible. So getting to know your capacity involves setting internal boundaries in what